Pelacata, face peeler. This is a legend that goes back decades in Peru. And she saw this person dressed head to foot in black body armor, flying on a disc. And he took a nasal syringe and he sucked it up and shot it up her nose. You can see the two incision lines. One was here and then the other one right under. She's passed out at this point. He floated up next to her and then he landed next to her. And he grabbed her from behind. He put his hand over her mouth. When we went into the village, it's the evening, and in the Amazon, in the evening in the plaza, all the men are playing soccer, all the women are playing volleyball. And so we're walking around, everyone's kind of just having fun playing soccer or volleyball. And we look over and we see this girl sitting all by herself, 15-year-old girl, sitting up against a hut. And she's just all by herself, just sitting there. And the Apu informed us that was Talia. And I said, well, can we talk to her? He said, well, I'll talk to her dad and see if her dad can approach her because she's very traumatized. And so we're standing there, and the Apu goes to find the father, and she looks over at us, me and Doug. And we're pretty imposing characters. I mean, Doug's a big guy, and I'm tall, and we're imposing-looking gringos. We got a machete and so forth. She looks over at us. She casually glances at us, and as soon as she sees us, she starts to tremble. And she's maybe 20, 30 yards away. She sees us. She instantly starts to tremble. And she takes her hair, and she moves it to the side of her face to block us from seeing her face. You understand what I'm saying? She takes her hair and moves. And she's sitting there trembling. And she starts to block her face like this. And instantly I recognize, wow, this is serious trauma. And our heart broke for this girl. And the father went over to her and talked to her and tried to convince her to come over and talk to us. And she wouldn't come. She got up and ran away. And the father, he came over and said, she's just really, really traumatized. And he said, but here's what I want you to do. Come by tomorrow morning to my house, and I will bring her. And you guys will be able to talk to her. So that's what we did. The following morning, we visited their home, and we waited in the backyard, and the father eventually was able to convince Talia to come and talk to us. And when I encountered Talia, when she saw me, she started to cry, and she was trembling uncontrollably. And she started to cry, and again, our hearts broke for this girl, obviously severe PTSD, and we were triggering it. So she related her story. I was eventually able, it took a while, for her to warm up to us. She was associating me and Doug with her assailants. So, and you'll understand why in a minute. So she had this PTSD, and she was associating us with the assailants. So I interviewed her, and she told me that one evening back in July, she was in her backyard, and she had this long stick, and she was trying to knock down some fruit from the tree to make a drink out of it for dinner. And the sun is just starting to go down. And again, the incursions only happened after dark, or as it was getting dark. And she knocked down the fruit from the tree, and she bent over to pick up the fruit. And when she bent over, she felt a wind at her back, and the dry leaves began to rustle at her feet. And she looked up to see what was generating this wind, and she saw this person dressed head to foot in black body armor, flying on a disc, and she went like this. He was flying on a disc, and behind her house, there's like a little gully, and it's a forested gully, so it's jungle back there. And then around this little forested gully, there's other houses. And there's a little hill that comes up to her house. And this assailant, who they all were calling again Pelacata, the face peeler, he floated up next to her, and then he landed next to her. And he grabbed her from behind, he put his hand over her mouth. And then she saw another one coming behind him. in the same manner, floating, like surfing up on this hoverboard, this circular platform. He floats up the hill, lands in front of her, and he grabs her legs. So now she's being held from behind by one assailant, and then her legs, the other guy has her legs. And they lift her up together on their hoverboards, on their circular discs. They lift her up and they fly her behind like this thatch roof chicken coop. And then they land. And her mouth is covered. And then they proceed, the one who was holding her feet, he took out a powder, and then he took some sort of a solution and he mixed it in the powder. And then he took a nasal syringe and he sucked it up and shot it up her nose. And this made her feel sedated. And then they took out a long tube, looked like a toothpaste tube or something, and this had a cream in it. And the guy that was holding her mouth from behind, he started to smear this cream all over her face. And as he was doing it, the guy in front said, be careful. Don't put too much on. Don't apply too much because you're going to ruin the flesh. That's what she said.
In English?
So this is the first time that now we're hearing testimony that these assailants, of these assailants speaking.
Was it
They
in
spoke in
English?
Spanish.
In Spanish.
Yeah, so she referred to the larger, one was taller than the other. The larger one was taller than me. The other one was at least as tall as me, if not taller. She referred to the larger one as the gringo. And the shorter one, who was still taller than me, as the Peruvian. Because when they spoke, the larger one had a gringo accent, Spanish accent, and the other one sounded just like them. He sounded Peruvian. So he didn't have an accent. And so after they apply this stuff to her face, they take out what Doug and I think is a laser scalpel. They take out this little device that has like a laser light on it, and they begin to make an incision under her jawline. And she starts to struggle. And so they actually restarted the incision. So you can see in photos of her and in the videos that I published on YouTube, you can see the two incision lines. One was here and then the other one right under it. And as they're beginning to cut under her jawline, she's struggling. This is the last energy she has. She starts to freak out, and she gets her hand underneath the helmet of the guy behind her that still has his hand over her mouth, right? And she starts to lift up on the helmet. And he gets agitated and he freaks out a little bit because he doesn't want his face to be seen, apparently. That's what she told me. He freaks out for a second and they drop her. And when they drop her, she lets out a blood-curdling scream. And remember, the villages are in a state of high vigilance. So the men are all sitting in front of their houses with shotguns and flashlights. This is not the first incursion. They know something's going on. They're aware of these assailants, so they're ready. So when she screams, her brother and a group of other villagers who live in proximity to her house come running instantly. Like they're on the scene in 20 seconds. And I talked to them. They showed up with their flashlights and their shotguns. And what they saw was Talia laying on the ground, bloodied up, blood all over her face and neck. She's passed out at this point, and the assailants are hovering like this on their circular platforms. And Talia, before she passed out, after she screamed, she said that the assailants said, let's go, we got to get out of here. And then one of them said, no, we can't just leave her here. And so they tried to drag her up the hill as they're floating on their platforms. They tried to drag her up the hill, but they dropped her because the other villagers were on the scene. And so the villagers are there with their flashlights trained on these guys, two of them, and they maneuver to where there's an opening in the canopy, and they shoot up through the canopy. And Talia was, of course, unconscious, and her face had swollen up. She said whatever that cream was that they applied to her face, it made her face swell up. It made her flesh swell up on her face. They took Talia to a village down the river where they have a better medical installation, and they treated her wounds. And eventually when she came to, which I think was the next day, her face was swollen for 3 days. She was in the medical facility for a while. They diagnosed her with severe PTSD after this event. And she had severe PTSD when I was talking to her, trembling. She was talking very quietly and obviously just very traumatized. Mm-hmm. And her father was traumatized. Her father was there as we were talking. He was filling in some of the details. And so obviously something horrific had happened to this young girl, and her testimony synchronizes with what everyone else was saying. So apparently somebody was out there in the Peruvian Amazon with advanced technology, certainly advanced hoverboard technology, but not just that, advanced aerospace vehicles that could hover silently in the air, and was terrorizing this village for some unknown reason. Definitely not miners with jetpacks. Now, there was another incident that I mentioned earlier. This was happening, by the way, in various villages. This was not the only village.
Yeah, has this been happening anywhere else?
This was happening in various villages in Alto Nanay, in that region of Peru, and in other regions of the Peruvian Amazon. Reports of the face peelers were surfacing everywhere. So let me address the face peeler thing real quick. So pelacata, face peeler, this is a legend that goes back decades in Peru. When I lived there for 10 years in the Peruvian Amazon. When I lived there, I heard of the legend of the face peelers, and this was sort of like a face peeler was sort of like a boogeyman, and the mothers would tell their children, "Don't go out alone at night because the face peeler will get you." And the villagers, the indigenous people, there was no consensus on who the face peelers were. Some of them thought the face peelers were extraterrestrials, aliens. They can't be human precisely because of this technology that's being deployed, right? Others believed that the face peelers were gringos who were there to harvest organs and for whatever reason to harvest faces. This phenomenon, this legend goes back to the mid to early 80s, but not further back than that. It began in the 80s. And I know that for a fact because I talked to the guys in the village, and they specifically told me that their fathers told them about the face peeler phenomenon, but it was not happening in the time of their grandfathers. So it was happening in the 80s. That's when it began. So this was not the first encounter with a phenomenon similar to what these people were experiencing. And that's why they started calling it the pelacata, that these are pelacatas, because for them, this was somewhat familiar. There had been in the past and during this particular episode in the Peruvian Amazon, individuals who were discovered with their face removed or with half of their face removed. I published a YouTube video in which this video got age restricted precisely because of this footage that was in the video of a young man that was being carried out of the river by some police officers, and it's apparent that his face, 3/4 of his face, had been surgically removed. This was not the result of piranhas chewing on his face. Piranhas leave nicks. I mean, they can clean the bone really well, but
it's precision cuts.
But these are precision. This is laser cuts around the guy's face. And the flesh of his face is totally gone. You just see the skeletal structure beneath. That sort of thing has been fairly common in the Peruvian Amazon, again, going back to the 80s. Now, when I say fairly common, I don't mean like every week or every month or even every year. But every now and again, somebody would turn up like that. And hence, face peeler. That's why they call them face peelers. When I was there...
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.